Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, going back to Louis DeVol again and talking a little bit about him, you said that he was also into, because from what I kind of could to take out from the article that you write, it was basically that he was a fraud and kind of a not really into the occult. He was working a lot with film. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Louis DeVol, he was not in the same class as Hitler's astrologer at all. Now, there's a lot about this man. He came to Britain under a different name. He came disguised as a Hungarian refugee, and he wasn't. Churchill put him... You see, Churchill would give him a lot of the information that he wanted him to produce the astrological backing for, if you're with me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not trying to say that he wasn't an astrologer, but he wasn't as gifted as some of them were about at the time. But he was the man in the right place. He was part of a network of people who were very influential. But what Churchill really wanted was someone who would back up his policies. Now, things like there was forged Nostradamus pamphlets that were dropped over Germany, predicting German defeats and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Louis DeVol was behind that. But what is interesting from our point of view was that he went to America and he worked for the Rockefeller Foundation and the CFR, and he was producing stuff for them, primarily for profit.
Really?
So what I mean by that is that there are people who will say, well, look, for the war effort, they're going to be needing X, Y, and Z.
Mm.
If we buy the factories that are producing that, then we can dictate prices and things, are you with me?
Yeah, sure.
So there was quite a bit of that going on.
Interesting. And you mentioned the kind of propaganda war that was going on also at that time. We had a guy called Abram Games or Gams.
Oh yes, yeah. He was Churchill's poster man, and he would produce a lot of propaganda posters. And the moulding of public opinion. To get men to go to war, you have to tell them that they're under threat. You have to tell them that the enemy are monsters.
Yeah. When
really they're just flesh and blood. They're just human beings, family men, the same as they are. You know.
Yeah.
There's a classic case of this, whereby it is on record that the workers at the Queen's estate at Sandringham. These were land workers during the war.
Mm-hmm.
Land workers are always the poorest paid. It doesn't matter to them who's in power, Labour, Conservative or what. It doesn't matter to them because they are on the bottom rung of the economic ladder. Now they saw that in Hitler's Germany, Hitler had brought in a lot of amenities for the lower paid. And some of these guys, they said, well, it doesn't matter to us whether we're ruled by Berlin or England, because we're still on the bottom of the economic ladder. So what you have to do, you have to change these men's mind frame. So you tell them things like, look, they're going to come across, they're going to rape your women, they're going to bomb everybody. You have to build up this. And all wars are built on racial hatred. And so this is what you have to do. And this is, in fact, what happened.
Interesting.
But there's a classic case of this. All the history books, they will tell you that when the Romans invaded Britain, the ancient Britons, they were savages, and they had all this blue paint called woad and stuff, Well, there are other accounts that says that in Britain there were actually universities at that time. If you look at some of the statements, these are educated men, at the time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people now saying, hey, if these guys were real savages, how come they could negotiate so effectively and so deeply? These are well-educated men. There's the saying that history is written by the politics of the winner. Now, that is so true.
It is.
So true. One of the guys at the Nuremberg war crimes trials, he said, had we won the war, he said, you would be in the dock for your war crimes.
Exactly, yeah. That's...
As a very young man, I thought, what is this about? What's this man saying? We didn't commit any war crimes. It's only later, when I found out some of the horrific stuff that we did, that I don't didn't really see any difference between us and them.
Yeah.
We're all sort of human beings. We're all God's children. What surprises me is that the BBC, we still get the films, the propaganda films that were made for World War II and just after II on our TV screens every week. Some of these I feel are very, very bad because they're still whipping up anti-German hatred and stuff like this. And I think, well, this is long gone now. This is wrong.
Do you think it still could be that they need to maintain the idea or kind of justify the idea of what happened during World War II to the people that are alive today?
I think you're right, Hendrik. I think you're right. I think this is what they're trying to do. But the average person now, it's a different world to them. They don't understand. They don't understand what it was all about. And of course, those that were there weren't told the truth.
Yeah. Exactly.
And this is my main bugbear, that we're never told the truth.
No, exactly. Again, it's run by those who have a totally different agenda, and all the people, as you say, at the bottom of this huge pyramid, as it were, is basically just trying to play catch up and just trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And in the meantime, there's a whole different agenda going on at the very top.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and people like Gordon Brown, he actually has no power. He is just the figurehead for the money people behind the scenes who dictate to him. And
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and this is part of what I was saying with the Louis de Waal thing. It's the big power brokers. Let me just tell you that Rothschild's bank, during the Napoleonic War, the two most powerful, wealthiest nations in the world, Britain and France, we were at war with each other. They were funded by just one bank. Rothschild's bank funded both sides. And afterwards he cleaned up, really did. And the same thing happened after the First World War.
Yeah, I mean, it was the situation basically after World War One with the Versailles Treaty and all of that stuff that basically, already back then started World War II, basically.
Exactly. You see, if there'd been a fair settlement after World War One, there'd have been no Hitler.
Yeah.
But the banks came in and they stripped Germany bare. They robbed Germany. They said, you were going to pay these colossal sums,
Yeah.
And I feel that was wrong.
And wasn't it actually, I think you wrote about that Neville Chamberlain was one of the guys who had talks with Germany, back then. And they were trying to kind of fix, so to speak, the situation because of how they had been mistreated after World War One.
Well, that's right. Neville Chamberlain, he was reckoned to be the most popular British Prime Minister ever. He came from a family of politicians. He grew up with politics and he understood about balance. And he didn't want, the British people did not want war with Germany. They'd had one war with them during the First World War. They didn't want another one. And so Neville Chamberlain, he went and he negotiated, and Britain should have kept out of it. In retrospect now, from many historians now, they're saying that what had it got to do with Britain that they moved into Poland? Do you know what? Our agreement with Poland, it was against Soviet aggression, not against German aggression.
Really?
1950, we had a Grade 1 pact, which is the strongest pact you can have with Tibet against Chinese aggression. And yet when the Chinese moved in and committed a genocide in Tibet, there was just a few letters of protest in the Times and we did nothing because it didn't suit us to. Let me just tell you a little something now. So Anthony Blunt told me, and at the time I wasn't sure, but over the years I found other bits of peripheral information which backs this up, and this is going to shake you. Anthony Blunt, one of the biggest spies of World War II, I didn't like his personal life, but he said to me, before the Mayfair debriefing, he said that what happened, he said, was that the Soviets, he said, they murdered the Romanovs. He said they wanted he said the Tsar was probably the richest man in the world. He said they wanted all the riches. He said the Soviets, he said they murdered the Romanovs. He said the British royal family, he said they were horrified because they could have taken them in, but they didn't want to bring them into Britain because of the weight on the public purse for them alone. You had to loan more royals coming in. He said the Queen Mother, who was loved by the British public, he said she was one of the biggest supporters of Hitler because Hitler was one of the only men to stand up against the Soviets. So she secretly supported him. And Anthony Blunt said, he said, the reason why they couldn't prosecute me for what I'd done, he said, was because at the end of the war, he said, I went to the ruins of the Chancellery, he said, and I brought back letters of support from the Queen Mother, he said, and he said, various artifacts like that, he said, and I kept a little bit back for insurance, and he winked at me. So they could. But the other point, Hendrik, and this you've got to think about, when the Germans were bombing London, one of the biggest targets in London was Buckingham Palace, right? But only one stray bomb ever landed in the grounds of Buckingham Palace, right? And the Germans apologised. I thought, that's strange. Wouldn't you have thought they'd have said, right, Buckingham Palace, that's a figurehead there, we'll bomb the shit out of that.
Yeah, exactly. That is the first thing. Yeah, that's the first thing that you think that they would want to do, basically.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
But you see, they didn't, and you have to sort of say, well, what's going on behind the scenes? And I think Anthony Blunt was probably right that our royal family did support Hitler.
So what do you think about the Windsors, or I guess we should say the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, their involvement in these as the elite? I mean, many people say that the Rothschilds are kind of the bankers or those who handle the money, but they handle the money for the royals of the world. What do you think about an idea like that?
Well, my thoughts on the subject go back to the American Revolution, whereby the America was the jewel in Britain's crown. That was wonderful colonies there that had a beautiful future. But what happened was that the Americans, they broke away from Britain, and there was the row with George III. But it wasn't. The real row was with the Bank of England. The Bank of England wanted to tax them very, very heavily, and they wanted to charge them interest on loans. This is forbidden in every religion, usury, and it's the only time ever that Christ lost his temper in the Bible and smashed the place up with money changers in the temple. So the real reason Britain lost its colonies was because of the banks. It was the banks of England, and George III was their instrument. He was their puppet. So that was the real reason why we lost our colonies. And what I'm really saying is that it is the banks and the fact that I used to do a lot of student counselling, and the main problem with student counselling is they all owe big money. They all have these student debts.
Sure.
And I say to them, for God's sake, don't borrow anymore because you've got to pay it back. But virtually every day, one bank or another will write to a student and they'll say, look, we'll offer you this amount of money, that amount of money.
Yeah. Isn't it that incredible when you actually sit down and think about it? Because what these people are doing is that they're educating themselves in order to serve society through work or whatnot. So, I mean, when you logically think about it, you would think that the government or the interests of the industry or whatever would actually pay, for the education of people.
That's a very sobering thought, that. I'm a bit of an idealist, Hendrik. I have this dream of one day there'll be truth, one day there'll be fair play, one day everybody will get a fair crack of the whip. But how realistic that is, I really don't know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, the first thing, so to speak, we got to deal with is we got to root out many of the things that has been going on in the past, and we got to study history to a certain degree to understand how we have been fooled, basically, and through that we can kind of recognize and learn to see how we are being lied to today, in a way.
Yes, well, I think that's very profound. Yeah, but as I say, they say in intelligence circles that the first casualty of war is truth, and that's so true. It's so true. But remember that the government is at war with its electorate every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day they're trying to mould opinion.